Fukushima town. The green box smiles, no frowns around. Soft and sweet, with a glowing hue. It's the perfect snack for me and you. Source from near, but what's in the air might not be clear. Take a bite, don't think too much. Locals cheer with every touch. They say the cream is fresh, sourced from near, but what's in the air might not be clear. Take a bite, don't think too much. Locals cheer with every touch.
There's a story underneath that song, a recent story where Japan is selling food from the nuclear wasteland. They're targeting children. Very, very appropriate song for this first story of my visit to it. Links are in the description to the song. Let's just decide what the song. There's lots of those songs there. And pointing out, the musician, the artist, the filmmakers, pointing out the obvious. You know, that the children are being targeted for their radioactive food. It just doesn't seem real, does it? That's the theme of every one of these shows, unfortunately. It just doesn't seem real. So this is on the 15th. This is day 4 of multiple nuclear reactors melting down. You get all your ducks in a row. You get all your nuclear meltdowns in a row. At the top of each of the buildings could have been at least 8 reactor cores. These are huge reactor cores each. And they're gone. And so you're looking at around 36 reactor cores. When you look at a year and a half later, what the reactor 3 and 4 looked like, for instance, officially none of this happened. The United Nations has stepped in and told the worldwide media and the universities and the pundits to not refer to these anymore. And they didn't, right? So officially that never happened. Officially it doesn't look like this. Officially they got all the fuel out of the fuel pools at both of the buildings that were at the top of these 19-story, 65-meter, 190-foot buildings. The plumes covered the entire planet within 20 days, and this is only based upon a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of the inventories that were lost. And so the Neptunium-239 dispersal decays to plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. The media came out and swore that that building didn't melt down and that they were at the top of it. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with the cover-ups? And people watch all of this and be like, guys, it's conspiracy theories, tell you, buddy. I'm starting to believe some of them, to tell you the truth. Sometimes. I'm not going to say I doubt myself, but Sometimes I got to wonder, am I dreaming all of this? Because why ain't the planet fighting back? Now we're in real trouble. Now we're in real trouble. Something just ran down my leg. No, just kidding you. All the whales are emaciated worldwide. Last year, 13,000, the grey whales in particular, we'll use as an example tonight, are so emaciated that last year when they were migrating south, they were emaciated. Like they're in such poor shape that they're afraid to come out and actually say, they say the word emaciated though, I think, don't they? Can't remember anymore. Researchers believe, that's a conjecture, the poor condition, the emaciated whales, just can't say it. The blubber's like, that stuff is really tough, right? Normally it's 12 inches of blubber. Now you can count all the ribs, no problems. You count every vertebrae under spine. The poor condition is due to changing feeding conditions. What does that even mean? They changed their diet after millions of generations? The industry, the media is just unbelievably criminal in downplaying every facet of this. The whales were already in poor shape last fall when they began 12,000-mile migration to the breeding. None of the babies survived that 12,000-mile trip, by the way. Now there's only 13,000 of them left. 14,000 have died officially since 2016. Emaciated. 12,000-mile migration to breeding. They were in terrible shape last year. Now they're headed. The whales we are seeing are extremely emaciated. And because we cover so many stories of emaciated, thin, malnourished, whatever you want to call it, but I'll always call it what it is, which is emaciated, because that's the appropriate word. And that's how I roll, okay? Like this says, not just the grey whales, this is a killer whale in Belgium less than 2 months ago. I can show you the same picture for New Zealand, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, of a killer whale, an apex predator that eats over 300 species. You can count all the ribs and the incredible peanut head, so all the muscle and meat is gone. You can see the shoulder bone sticking out. It's, I've done a presentation on that. You'll find it in the dedicated playlist of die-offs. Just go to the last video and you'll see all the just very difficult to look at pictures. Highly radioactive glass rained down on Tokyo. 500 billion atoms a kilogram. This is not something we've heard pre-Fukushima. These numbers are, there's no way to describe how dangerous we're talking about. Because every atom that's in your body is pulsing energy at the speed of light, and your body has to try to repair the damage every second and attack the source every second for the rest of your life. So you have it does have white blood cells, so you have a lot less red blood cells that carry oxygen and nutrition, which means you get lazy and lethargic forever. And all kinds of health issues. You're more susceptible, just like every animal too, right? So the whales died not of starvation per se, because there's still species out there for them to eat, because they're the apex predators, so how do they become emaciated? They have so much radiation bioaccumulated in their body. The plume covering the Pacific Ocean and Canada, United States, minimum number, and where I typically, a couple of different isotopes to kind of give you a concept, is 1 million atoms per square meter. That's considered disposition, radioactive fallout on the ground. 185, like an old turtle, 185 atoms would be per square meter, would normally be an evacuation zone at a nuclear power plant, or even less at a nuclear power site. Now 1 million atoms per square meter is, who cares? 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131. Iodine-131 can only exist if it pulses energy every second. So you can't have 20,000 particles of radioactive iodine-131 without at least minimum 20 million pulses of energy almost at the speed of light every second in that liter of iodine-131. because that's what iodine-131 does. And if it doesn't do it, then it's not iodine-131. So that's now officially they downplayed it, and the guy, I can play the video actually of the weasel. But there's a reason why he said there was equal to 10 pulses of energy a second. Of course, this is ludicrous because iodine-131 pulses at the speed of light every second. Here we go. I forgot what I was supposed to do at that time. It's pretty rare, but every once in a while I actually know where something is too. Right away. It always takes a moment. I always find it. So, this is Chris Sarkrisky or something. He's not from Canada. He's at the university. He's Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, British Columbia.
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one.
So you see up here, the middle, it says living next to a nuclear power station. He's saying is less than sleeping next to your loved one. Now he's talking to an audience. Let me start that again. But the audience all laughs on cue. How did they know to laugh on cue?
And living next to a nuclear power station can actually contribute less than your loved one when it comes to... with myself as one of the principal investigators, was awarded $6 million.
At a Canadian university to promote radiation therapy, which is how to kill you in the hospitals, right? They can't get you with radiation therapy, they'll get you with chemo. And once they get you hooked on either one, then the other one shows up. It's chemo radiation, right? That's the typical, how do you finish you off? When you're getting close to your $900,000 tab that you're allowed to run up for cancer, because they'll steal you away, right? Your children away to give them these doses and then kill them. 20 million atoms. It takes an atom to make an iodine pulse of energy, right? So 20 million atoms, but these are particles, so these are part of the reactor buildings that were atomized in aerosol and ionized and radiated and came out the other end, an invisible plume of iodine-131, but at an enormous number. This is an enormous number, 5,500 miles away, 6,500 miles away. These are insane numbers per liter. And obviously it's not just going to be that, right? In that same one, there's going to be a million of those and some of them and everything else, right? And so does a liter cover a single square meter? It does multiple liters in that square meter. So there's actually multiple liters in that square meter. So that square meter would have had, say, 100 million atoms minimum of iodine-131. It would have had 10 times more iodine-132, 30 times more iodine-133, 31 times more iodine-129. This was an independent study out of Ottawa, Canada. So this lasts for 150 million years. There's 10 half-lives. Each half-life in this case is 15 million years, where it pulses energy every second. So this kind of stuff annihilates the thyroid glands of all the species, not just humans, but all the species. Rounds up to the show here. Is Fukushima nuclear fallout behind the remaining 13,000 migratory gray whales being severely emaciated? What else could it be? What is the catalyst? Because all these mass die-offs are post-Fukushima. All these supercell typhoons, cyclones, hurricanes coming ashore at 150, 200 miles per hour, something we've never seen before in populated areas. And I can say that with authority because we don't have building codes anywhere on the planet for those types of winds. And if it was regular, then we would have had building codes, right? We don't. I've been under siege for so long. It's not normal if somebody doesn't attack me. But don't attack me because of ignorance, because I'm providing with all the documentation. Attack me because you don't like me. You just think I'm an asshole. That's fine. but don't attack me because I'm wrong, because I'm not. This is the plume of xenon, or cesium-137, covering the entire planet, according to the French government, in 31 days when it stops. So this is, let me back it up. There's 31 days there. So this should be 20 days right there of radioactive fallout of 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. This is 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. So there was an enormous amount in Japan that just defies. I mean, there's not 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. We're 14 years later. I don't know how bad it is now, but they don't release that number no more. 1 million atoms per square meter over the west coast after the explosions of xenon-133. 20 million atoms, particles, which actually produce more atoms, splitting atoms rather. Radioactive iodine-131 per liter fell on the United States during post-Fukushima. 220 million atoms per liter iodine-129 in the rain after Fukushima with a 15 million year half-life. So this is enough to saturate the thyroid glands of just, these are gammas mostly, of just gamma. So the thyroids, the muscles, the hearts are going to be incredibly under stress immediately. You're producing radioactive hormones, and you can't have this without bone seekers. So when you tell me these numbers, you're going to have equal numbers of bone seekers, strontiums, americium, neptunium, plutoniums, many, many, many other bone seekers. So now you're mutating your stem cells. So every species and every human on the planet is mutating stem cells. So clearly they got a cure for this. I mean, they produce 4.3 million studies a year. They studied nuclear more than anything else. They're not going to kill themselves, the people that are behind this. There is an agenda for 80 years to poison the planet. This is why every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, as far as you can see. It's a clear agenda. But the big problem is the fuel pools are all hemorrhaging radiation. They're still splitting atoms for millions of years. And just because it's in a pool of water, that's not going to contain it. It boils off 120,000 liters out of each pool. There's 1,000 pools worldwide producing plumes just like this. 1,000 plumes just like that after the first 30 days. And they've been going for decades. It gets assimilated into everything. And because it's so small, and as it builds up, so the French study, right, is showing 1 million atoms, or 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima numbers. And so pre-Fukushima numbers were only the nuclear war you call nuclear testing for some reason. It's the same weapons, the same radioactive fallout. Oh no, it was just a test. Yeah, a test of what? What they can get away with. This was a war. It's the same fallout. The biggest Soviet bomb was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's going off at one time. And a Nagasaki made a plume like that. And anthropogenic man-made radiation is the only element on this planet that makes a plume that symmetrically can cover the entire planet in just weeks and might never go away. And we're producing it nonstop worldwide from 1,000 different sites every day that we know about. Not counting what they dumped into the ocean. And France just come out and acknowledged that they're going to have to clean up to 200,000 drums just in one spot off their coastlines. And the problem with the drums was that they're crimped on the top and bottom. The lids for the top and bottom are crimped onto a 45-gallon drum. So you fill it up with nuclear waste, right? And they throw it over to these special built freighters to go out and throw nuclear waste on the continental shelf, which is the nursery of the oceans, by the way, and threw their nuclear waste down there, knowing that when it got down 2 or 3 atmospheres, 100 feet, there's 14.6 pounds per every atmosphere, every 33 feet. That would crush the 45-gallon drum, which means the lid, top and bottom, one or the other or both would fall off. And you would release the nuclear waste directly into the food chain right then and there. That was the best way to do it. Because the ocean currents would mix it over a few decades, And then how do you blame this explosion? And the cancer epidemic started in the 70s, right? Now they say everybody got cancer, and that it's just absurd what they got done and got away with, and done it on purpose, and it has absolutely no conscience about it whatsoever. They know what they've done too. On top of it, they know how significant it is, but they just don't care about themselves or anybody else or the species, because they're attacking every species. They're not going to fight for humanity. They fight for the 8 million species, the million that we got left. So the song tonight about the students eating radioactive cream boxes at the 7-Elevens and other places targeting children. I'll put a link in that description for that song for you, so you can play it while you're watching the show. Program teaches Fukushima students to sell contaminated food, 2014. OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, teaches Fukushima students to sell contaminated food. And I was like, what am I looking at? I was looking for, I was looking for incinerators and a couple of sites that aggregate a lot of the Japan news cycle from back in the day. And I was trying to find, because I have such a massive collection over these years, because you're doing all of this material, and then at the end of the show, all that material got to disappear somewhere, because I got a whole new show ready to go, or get ready to go. And then my brain has to try to retain this so that we can do comparisons, but you can't always remember where you put everything. And new academic abilities and students' activities in Date Prefecture, Fukushima Prefecture, is a nuclear wasteland. And so this is part of a United Nations program. The program claimed to teach new academic ability. The model project currently going on is a joint project between OECD, Fukushima University. These are just terrible academics at this institution. Their legacy is just so criminal. And the education ministry. So they're all out to get the people of Japan. It just doesn't seem possible, but pay attention for a bit, and you'll have to agree with me, unfortunately, that I'm right. Fukushima University, I can show you headlines of how they conspired with the United Nations. All the health is quantified at Fukushima University. So unless Fukushima University says Fukushima caused it, then you can't claim it as happening because of Fukushima, right? Legally, you can't get medical attention. You can't do anything unless the university accepts it as an issue from Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. And they refuse to acknowledge everybody got cancer from Fukushima. So officially, nobody got cancer from Fukushima. But in the first year, cancer rates rose by an extra 865,000 extra people, right out of the blue, post-Fukushima in the first year, had cancer. And cancer is not the only health issue that's going to manifest or be diagnosed. There's heart, there's liver, there's lung. Not everybody got health care, not everybody was diagnosed. And there's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. Like when you get into the thyroid in the skeleton, you're mutating radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells as you're developing, the children are developing, the species are developing. How do you think that's really going to play out on the species that produce prolifically? Well, they're going to disappear first, right? So 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care, not everybody was diagnosed. The OECD program showed the students how to repackage the food in a nuclear wasteland to make the origins less obvious to the consumers in an attempt to sell what is likely a contaminated product. No, you can't write Fukushima. Are you crazy? Nobody's going to eat it. So let's write this down there. And I've been a long-time heavy promoter of nuclear power and related industries. It's an official United Nations observer. So it's an inside organization, right? It's got a lot of member countries. The United Nations General Assembly has granted observer status to the international organization and entities and non-member states to enable them to participate in the work of this corporation structured like McDonald's but called United Nations, which is 195 militaries and a threat to every human on the planet. The General Assembly determines the privileges it will grant so they can create these organizations that take over your planet at a thin air as long as they, unelected, unappointed, which then they were the League of Nations pre-Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So when you see nuclear, they're like, wee! The official founding members are the following. You got to look at the Canadians, all the other countries. A lot of nuclear countries, right? Japan became a member in 1964, or the shadow government anyway. Stated purpose of maintaining international peace. Really, United Nations. Its purpose was maintaining international peace. And then what? Everybody sails off to the sunset? How do you get 195 militaries just to sit around picking their nose? How does that work? Because the weapons basically got a shelf life, and so if they don't shoot them, they're going to go bad, like fruit, stuff like that. That's why there's so many fruits in that. And this is the picture, the link, and for maintaining international peace and security. This is the picture they linked you to. He's cutting into a missile. It's absurd, and you'll see why coming up. There are in total 93 member states, 2 observer states, 195 militaries, actually, is what it is. It's like NATO. If you look up NATO, it's 30 militaries. That's what it says. The very first sentence is, NATO is 30 militaries. They were created in opposition to the former Soviet Union. And so when the Soviet Union was artificially collapsed, along with the pensions and the patents of the country, the heartless, soulless creatures that done that, it wasn't just Gorbachev, right? Then the United Nations has been praised as the leader of peace and human development. It is so absurd. Well, many officers and agencies have been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So that's your litany, is it? Oh, they got the Nobel Peace Prize. You can't say anything about them. Which means Obama's got the Nobel Peace Prize. You see, they had an AI video of him being arrested. So that's there was no public apologies. There was no good one, guys. He just slinked away and kept his pie hole shut. Well, with many officers and agencies having been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So there you go. Unless you got the Peace Prize, shut your pie hole. You're a friggin' nobody. You shut your pie hole. He's got a Peace Prize. He said it's okay. We feed all the children food from a nuclear wasteland. And so be it. It's the right thing to do. He's got a Nobel Peace Prize. How are you going to beat somebody with a Nobel Peace Prize, Dana? You got a Nobel Peace Prize, Dana? No, I don't. Do I want one? No. Why would I want something dirty like that? I already hate getting in the shower. I have to shower all the time to get that one. But many officers and agencies being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, that is just absurd. Whatever whatever gets them to sleep at night, whatever blows their skirt up, I suppose, has also been criticized, perceived ineffectiveness, bias, bigotry, prejudice, and corruption. Corruption should have been the first word. During World War I, several major leaders, especially UN President Woodrow Wilson, advocated for a world body to guarantee peace. Guarantee peace. And they still haven't managed to figure it out. There's around 87 conflicts currently ongoing worldwide. They're all buying their weapons from the same country and from the same supplier. Total coincidence. That total coincidence. The League of Nations was approved and started operation. The United States never joined it. On the 10th of January 1920, in the League of Nations, which now United Nations, the United Knuckleheads, formally came into being when the Covenant of the League of Nations, ratified by 42 nations in 1919, took effect. Now, it doesn't stop there. The League Council acted as an executive body directing the Assembly's business and began with 4 permanent members. So the first 4 big shots were UK, France, Italy, and Japan. And Roosevelt is considered a founder of the UN and coined the term United Nations to describe the allied countries, the United Nations. It was about a bunch of countries that were allied. Now they're gods, right? And they feel like gods too, right? They control the whole planet by proxy because they control the majority of the high gross product. The text of the Declaration by the United Nations was drafted 29th of December 41 by Roosevelt, Churchill, and Harry Hopkins. We're getting there. Roosevelt felt the 4 powers referred to the 4 major allied countries, United States, United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, China, emerged in the Declaration by the United Nations. Yeah, that's interesting. By the 1st of March 1945, 21 additional states signed the Declaration of the United Nations. And after months of planning, so we went from 1990 all the way up now to 1945, they're still not official. The UN Conference International Organizations opened in San Francisco on the 25th of April, 1945, attended by 50 nations now, governments, and a number of non-governmental organizations. San Francisco, the birthplace of United Nations. Previously, Churchill had urged Roosevelt to restore France to its status of a major power after the liberation of Paris in August. So a lot of people died to liberate France, and they just stabbed everybody in the back ever since. The UN officially came into existence on the 24th of October, 1945. So there you have it. Not 1990. Upon ratification of the Charter by the 5 permanent members, the United States, United Kingdom, France, the Soviet Union, and China, and by a majority of the other 46 nations. So now they announced that they own the planet, and whatever they say has to go, and they'll just corrupt politicians till they get their way, because they have an overwhelming amount of income. So the first thing they done was they went to, Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened just before this. And so Japan had occupied North Korea for 50 years. And, right, the numbers gets thrown around a little bit. It was actually 50 years or so. And so now Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened, they left. North Korea, after being enslaved for over 50 years, wanted to be free and fought for its freedom. The United Nations came in and decided that that wasn't going to happen. The firebombing of North Korea. If you were asked to name the most heavily bombed country in history, you wouldn't name North Korea, would you? And the North Korea is known as the Forgotten War. Let me get my head out of it. North Korea probably wouldn't be one of the first places to come to mind, despite the fact that it's the 3rd most bombed place on Earth. The Korean War is known as the Forgotten War. For North Koreans, the war never really ended. 5 million people lost their lives in the conflict. It was, my understanding, was a lot more than that. Much of the country was utterly destroyed. by United Nations. Right? This is United Nations done this. The first thing they done as a organization, peacekeeping, of course. The bombing campaign continued to serve as the foundation for the widely publicized militarism, paranoia, and hatred for United Nations, the United States, for which the isolated country is infamous today. They've been used as they were demonized ever since the United Nations had to lost the war. They call it a police action, right? According to MASH 4077, it's a police action. And MASH 407 was about selling that police action, right? Which was a slaughter. Japan's surrender in 1945 led to the liberation of the Korean Peninsula, like I was saying earlier, which had been under Tokyo control since 1910. And the real numbers come out later. The firebombing of North Korea, U.S.-led forces in the early days of the war, LeMay, who was now head of the Strategic Air Command, advocated for the use of nuclear bombs to bring the war to a swift end. And the head of United Nations Command, Douglas MacArthur, was also in favor. So they wanted to use, I think it was 10 nuclear weapons or something to solve that equation. I would have dropped between 30 to 50 tactical atomic bombs on the air bases and other depots. Because back in those days, your military was separated from your communities. Now your communities are human shields. Particularly when it came to and still is as for nuclear missiles. Most of the land-based nuclear missiles are in farmers' fields. MacArthur was removed from command, so they're holding those communities as human shields by putting their nuclear weapons there, right? With the nuclear option ruled out as on moral grounds. MacArthur was removed from command the following year. But that was only because he spoke out against, right? He said he's seen as much blood and guts as any man on this planet has ever seen. And what he's seen in North Korea turned his guts. 50s, Korea misery sickened war-tough MacArthur. So they got to put on a headline that makes no sense because their hero had pains of conscience. Having just been fired as commander of the Allied forces in Korea, a defiant Douglas MacArthur appeared before Congress and spoke of the human suffering so horrifying that his parting glimpse of it caused him to become sickened and nauseated. I have never seen such devastation, the General MacArthur told members of the Senate Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committee. At that time in 1951, the Korean War was less than a year old. Casualties, he estimated, were already topping 1 million. This was in the very early stages. He said, I've seen, I guess, as much blood and disaster as any living man, and it just curled my stomach. I've seen the video footage of the flamethrowers used on the villagers, men, women, and children. Americans have forgotten what we did to North Koreans. They flattened every community, every city. The U.S. dropped more bombs in North Korea than it dropped in the entire Pacific theater during World War II on this little tiny country. This carpet bombing included 32,000 tons of napalm, often deliberately targeting civilians. Let's put that. They burned down all the cities with napalm. They used to call it cooking oil, right? 32,000 tons times 2,000. 64 million pounds of napalm. 64, like a pound of napalm, you could do some serious damage with a flamethrower and a pound of napalm. No problem starting a forest fire, let's put it that way. Devastating a country far beyond what was necessary to fight the war, and whole cities were destroyed. They burnt down every town, every village, and every city in the country. Not counting everything else they'd done. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions of orphans, a major war crime, yet it showed that North Korea's hatred of America is not all manufactured. It is rooted, this was UN, not United States. This was a coalition, right? Is not all manufactured, wrote. It is rooted in a fact-based narrative, one that North Korea obsessively remembered and the United States blatantly, conveniently forgot. Well, no, they need an enemy to justify the military-industrial complex. Every country does the same routine, right? But what United Nations, which is 195 countries, done to North Korea as a police action, they said. And then South Korea shot, and I don't know how many thousands of their own people because they were sympathetic to the North Koreans. They incarcerated tens of thousands of their own people because they were sympathetic. Over the period of 3 years or so, we killed off, 20% of the population? Air Force General Curtis LeMay. U.S. bombers destroyed the hydroelectric irrigation dams in later stages of the war, flooding farmlands and destroying crops. On January the 3rd at 10:30 a.m., an armada of 82 flying fortresses loosed their death-dealing load on the city of Pyongyang. Hundreds of tons of bombs and incendiary compounds were simultaneously dropped throughout the city, causing annihilating fires. In order to prevent the extinctions of these fires, the transatlantic barbarians bombed the city with delayed action high explosive bombs, which had exploded at intervals throughout the whole day. So they dropped all these bombs, but they didn't all explode at one time. They exploded all over the place for hours and hours and hours throughout the day, making it impossible for people to come out onto the streets and to burn in their homes. These were huge bombs. These leave craters, like 900-foot wide craters, 3 football field wide craters. The entire city has now been burning, enveloped in flames for 2 days. And by the second day, 7,812 civilian houses had been burnt down. 7,800. The Americans were well aware there was no military objectives left in that city. And the number of inhabitants of Pyongyang killed by bomb splinters, burned alive and suffocated by smoke is incalculable, because no computational is possible. Some 50,000 people remained in the city, which originally had a population of 100,000. 500,000. So theoretically killed 450,000 people. As the United Nations, just kill them all. Yeah, it's okay. It was a police action, Dana. Perfectly normal. The United Nations allowed to do whatever they want anyway. USAF assessments estimated 18 of North Korea's 22 major cities had been half destroyed by the end of the war. 635,000 tons of bombs were dropped on North Korea, 475,000 tons more than the Allies dropped on Japan throughout World War II. Let's do the numbers on that one for a bit of fun. $635,000. 635,000 multiplied by 2,000 pounds per ton. 1.27 billion pounds of bombs. What was the population? 35 million people or something? Divided by 35 million. That was 36 pounds of bomb for every person. A 36-pound bomb is am I allowed to say that on YouTube? Probably not. This is United Nations done this. An estimated, conservative estimation, is 12 to 15% of North Korean populations died during the conflict. Another 12-15% died in the following year from their wounds. Another 50% survived with their wounds. The UN, United Nations, scrambled to justify the death toll. And they done it by downplaying the numbers here, right? There's another way they done that. The Korean War, and it wasn't a war. Korea didn't have the military capacity that the United Nations brought to the table. They had air superiority, and they burnt down the whole country, every village, every little community, every little town, every city, every big city, the entire country. With napalm too, right? Just nasty. That was United Nations. The Korean War, U.S. total destruction began 70 years ago for Koreans of a certain age. For a brief moment in the summer of 1945, there was joy in Korea. It had just been freed after 50 years. Who had suffered tremendously during half a century of brutal Japanese occupation. And World War II celebrated what they believed was the liberation by victorious U.S. Soviet forces on Japan. Full of hope for a future free of foreign rule, they proudly declared their independence. However, Supreme Allied Commander Douglas MacArthur announced that the U.S. and the USSR would be occupying and dividing the entire Korean peninsula. And adding insult to injury, vanished, but no less vicious, Japanese forces would be employed to violently repress dissent. Because the Japanese knew them well, see? So they won World War II. They were occupying Japan, used the same Japanese force that was occupying and repressing the country for half a century, North Korea, and then used these same vicious thugs to repress any dissent, to destroy, annihilate any dissent. And then he sent in 195 militaries to get the country to submit. The country wouldn't submit to the United Nations. And if you don't submit to the United Nations, you're not allowed to exist, right? The United States, that claims, United Nations, which claims to champion freedom. Whoever wrote the story didn't like America, but it's United Nations we're talking about. We're talking about all kinds of countries. It wasn't just the United States. The United Nations, which claimed to champion freedom, denied it to the people and for Korea, and has ostracized that country now for 74 years. So for 124 years, North Korea has been enslaved. I'm just saying the facts are what the facts are. Who very quickly realized that they were merely trading one occupying empire for another. A survey of Koreans, because all United Nations countries demonize North Korea. And that's used to promote all kinds of exercise with 195 UN countries in case North Korea gets them. A survey of, they're very sick, the military anyway is sick, but this is sick stuff. A survey of Koreans in the summer of 1946 found 77% preferred socialism or communism, while only 14% favored capitalism. The world used to be wonderful because you had all these different cultures. It was amazing. Now the so-called globalist, the United Nations wants to break up any resemblance of nice, wonderful, amazing. They destroy all the oceans, all the fresh water, GM for all the food. They destroy the health of every insect and every bird, animal, mammal, and human on the planet. And they can only exist until we're all gone. Right? Their whole ideology is about controlling and documenting every facet of everybody's life on the planet and every species on the planet. And they don't care about these species or lives. They just want to document it and we're like a bean, and they're bean counters. We're not this, we're not that. It's nothing personal. They don't like any of the species. They don't like any of the humans. They don't like any bacteria. They don't like any fungus. They don't like anything. Trees, they don't like nothing. They have to rule it and control it and obsess over it and dominate it and dictate to it. That's their whole ideology, and they have all these organizations to do exactly that. Right? They're the Borg in every sense of the word. By early 1950, there were more than 100,000 political prisoners in South Korea. Summary executions of leftists, both real and imaginary, claimed tens of thousands of life as the South police state reign of terror rivaled to worse outrages of the communist North. You know, people that were occupied for 50 years straight and denigrated. And so, like, if you put Kim Jong-il in the news section, you're going to get 150 stories today in 24-hour period to demonize them. Despite the fact that he's never done nothing in either one of these countries. What all of those countries and medias have in common is they're all UN countries. General Curtis Bomsue-Lemay, who commanded firebombing raids in Japanese cities that killed more civilians than the nuclear bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, served as Strategic Air Command during the Korean War. So, but the cruelest people you can find in charge, that's UN's routine, right? He would later acknowledge that over a period of 3 years, we killed off 20% of the population. It was way more than 20% of the population. Like, maybe that's what died in the 3 years, but there was people that barely survived for another year or 2 years because of the incredible, not everybody got wounded, died right away. U.S. forces near total supremacy was an aerial bombardment. They love that, right? Fish in a barrel. They thrive on that. That's the wars they generally only get participated in. They're not going to fight a real military that can fight back. You're just going to demon it. They're not going to fight Russia. They're not going to fight China. They're going to use them to justify the military consuming all your precious metals on the entire planet forever. Eventually, they got to get rid of everybody, so there's no way anybody can object or any species can be in the way of them having their bigger, better weapons for each quarter of the year. General George Stratmeyer ordered the United States bombers to destroy, which is UN bombers. It was India. It was France. It was United Kingdom. There was the big players. It was a police action, so people from all of these different United Nations so-called countries participated in that war, right? They all sent troops. More bombs dropped on North Korea than during the entire World War II Pacific campaign, and the massive U.S. carpet bombing of North Korea included napalm, incendiary, fragmentation bombs, killed and maimed by the thousands, left cities, towns, villages, and countrysides in scorched and shattered ruins. It's just an overwhelming amount of evil that the United Nations, for its first official, here we are, went out and destroyed a country and took incredible pleasure and has ostracized and demonized the country for 74 years, isn't it? In the northern capital, Pyongyang, only around 50,000 people out of the pre-war population of 500,000 remained in 1953. When all the cities and towns were destroyed, U.S. warplanes bombed dams, reservoirs, rice fields, flooding the countryside, destroying the nation's food supply. You see those connotations in all the stories, then you can kind of... U.S. commanders fearing northern troops would infiltrate a southern line, disguised as civilians, ordered fighter pilots to bomb and strafe refugees as they fled south. So the refugees, they just shoot them too. Don't let no one escape. That's UN. As the UN knows, there's no such thing as a refugee. It's an opportunity, right, for the UN to pretend that they're subhuman, because they can't be human at any moment. In the most infamous atrocities of the war, Air Force pilots killed hundreds of men, women, and children in no-gun raid over 3 days in late July 1950. And retreating U.S. troops also blew up bridges teeming with hundreds of refugees and burned villages, towns, and cities to the ground in a scorched earth policy meant to deny the advancing enemy quarters. So they justified destroying, genocide of dozens and dozens of community, just this one section, so that the enemy couldn't have shelter. Whatever gets you to sleep at night takes a whole new meaning. This was United Nations, folks. This is how they said, guess what we're going to do now that we're here. And this has never stopped. At least 100,000 South Koreans were murdered by their own armed forces who target anyone suspecting of having leftist, sympathetic to North Korea. John Ford's propaganda piece, This is Korea, in which footage of a flamethrower attack is accompanied by a movie cow by John Wayne's chilling voiceover, fry them out, burn them out, cook them, dropping napalm, they were plain. In comparisons, the Nazis had murdered 17% of Poland's pre-war population just a few years earlier. And speaking of Nazis, the destruction of Korea occurred just a few years after Germans were convicted at Nuremberg and subsequently executed for wanton destructions of cities, towns, and villages. By the time that North and South Korea, American and Chinese generals, China had intervened when Allied troops approaching its borders, signed a ceasefire agreement on July 27, 1953. North Korea was utterly in ruins. Everything is destroyed, said the U.S. bomber commander, General Emmett O'Donnell. There is nothing standing worthy of the name in the entire country. And he maimed everybody in that country. And among the most egregious crimes of the century that witnessed some of the most appalling barbarity in human history was United Nations' first act of kindness. Was what they done to North Korea. And so that's, it came to an end in July, and there is no end because they're still ostracized from the world. Since July 27, 1953, the anniversary is just a few days away. I noticed lately I don't do the date of the show at the beginning. All my life I've always done the date. So today's the 22nd. So the 27th is Sunday. Should have saved this show for Sunday, I guess. I'm pretty sure I can dig up some more. United Nations first act of kindness was to destroy millions of people forever, millions of orphans, millions of refugees. Here we go. Saskatchewan NDP MLA says young people in support of nuclear power. Really? After a trip to Ontario where there was no young people. She went to the Deep Geological Repository, allegedly, in Canada, which doesn't exist, of course, or won't. And disgusting CTV Canada, Canadian television. They got the name first, but that doesn't mean they got anything to do with Canada, these people. Aleana Young, NDP MLA. Oh, the young people love nuclear. Yeah, like young. No, there's no young people. We'll give her a second look. Said the youth are open to nuclear power. What is she talking about? Saskatchewan NDP MLA Aleana Young returned from Ontario, Canada, central Canada, on Thursday, fresh off several meetings with workers and industry leaders, not youths, in the nuclear power sector. Saskatchewan, she's from apparently, is aiming to have a small modular reactor in the province mid-2030s, 270s. Mid-230s, really. Small modular reactor. Like the one they're going to build in Ontario, that's taller than Fukushima reactors, is 240 feet tall. It's 10 stories below, 11 stories above, or something like that. What they call stories, but it's a 24-story building. Half of it underground. That's so far away. Why would she invoke any of this? And why is she getting media attention? Because she's in Saskatchewan. In Saskatchewan, they got uranium, and that's their whole world depends on their uranium. They're all taught to just love uranium. A final decision on whether to move forward with the project is expected no later than 2029. Final decision on a project. Putting a disease factory in another one in Canada is insane. Young says she feels the narrative towards nuclear power in Saskatchewan is vastly different than it was years ago. Who cares what she thinks? She never even seen a nuclear reactor until she went on that trip. With many now in favor of nuclear waste storage facilities as opposed to smokestacks. Like, what is she talking about? People are in favor of putting nuclear dumps in their communities rather than smokestacks. As opposed to smokestacks. Like, what does that mean? Nuclear waste storage facility is better than a smokestack. Like, how do you conflate them together? It's absurd what they're suggesting. I saw some of the nuclear waste in Ontario. She saw it with her own two eyes, folks. That had been safely stored. Safely. Everything is vented directly into the environment. Wherever it goes, whatever it gets in contact with, it destroys them for millions of years. Stored over 70 years. And when I talk to the young people, really, what young people? They see storage of waste that would fit in the space the size of the Regina airport compared to the pollution coming out of the top of smokestacks. These are the ramblings of a mad woman. She's mentally ill, and whoever quoted her is even worse. So the nuclear waste, if you stored all the nuclear waste in Regina airport, like the nuclear waste that they dump after the Manhattan Project in Hanford, which is 450 billion gallons, just that one little spot, it's equivalent to an aquarium of nuclear waste, 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, over 50 stories high, or 500 stories high, and wrapped around the entire planet more than once. So you can fit all of that in the Regina airport, can you? That's just one fraction of the nuclear waste. They had freighters in different countries, including the United Kingdom, for 30 years straight, going out every day, multiple freighters with 45-gallon drums, throwing it over the side of the boat into the ocean. She got a good kickback is what it was. Young people are deeply concerned about the economy and the environment, which is caused by 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry. It destroyed all the species. So why would you... Typically these stories are written by the nuclear lobbying group, and then it's sent to United Nations, the International Atomic Energy Agency, ERPA, UNSCLEAR, the IPRC or whatever. And then they'll fix it up, and then it'll be sent to the journalists. The journalists will put their name on it and publish it. Anything to do with nuclear, if you're at a main media, you are not going to publish it until United Nations or whichever one of their subsidies, which is typically International Atomic Energy Agency, ERPA, UNSCLEAR. They're all the same people on each of the panels, by the way. Same gray hair, 100 people. The MLA for Regina South Albert, said that after speaking with young people in Saskatchewan, she feels there is an openness to nuclear power. That includes being comfortable with storing nuclear waste produced by nuclear power plants. That is the strangest. We cover absurd amount of stories every week, let alone every month or every year. And that's one of the strangest connotations I've ever. So they're treading very carefully. The stories are written to manipulate. Like the grammar they're using is meant to induce a complacency of the readers. The MLA for Regional South Albert said that speaking with young people, she feels they're okay. She feels, but they have no evidence that she even done any of this. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization of Canada, just because her last name was Young, don't mean she spoke to young people. where Young said she began her Ontario tour, had completed a 15-year consent. It wasn't a consent-based democratic process on top of that. And which is, you see that with every country with nuclear will use that narrative. Well, we're not going to do it unless everybody agrees to do it. And by the way, here's $1 million for your fire department. Here's $500,000 for your ambulance. Here's, oh, you're with the school board. Here's a couple of $1 million each year for the next 14 years. They've done that throughout the whole community. Any influential government agencies, we're like, oh, thank you very much. Yeah, there's no auditing. You do wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Consent-based democratic process. She got a kickback. That's why whoever wrote the story, because she couldn't comprehend it, so they had to write it this way, right? Because they don't want her to read the story and go, holy shit, is that what I just took a couple of $100,000 for? For a long-term geological depository or a future job for nuclear waste, where they can 90% of the money stolen through administration, working towards a long-term safety storage solution. Well, if you haven't got it right after 80 years, you get the frig out of the way. You don't deserve to be in the equation. Right now, it's sitting in warehouses on the surface, splitting atoms directly into the environment. Most of it's in fuel pools, boiling off directly into the environment all day, every day. The emissions. All the fuel is still splitting atoms. You can't contain it. I saw a real commitment to safety above everything else, she allegedly said. This is like talking, like you're talking to somebody with placards, and they pull out the placard, and she says this, and they take another placard, and she says that. Except it's done digitally. This was probably just AI wrote the whole freaking thing on top of it. She has no concept of what she's talking about, even in the slightest, unfortunately. Young said that she consistently hears major concerns from residents regarding climate change. Yeah, because they're bombarded in every facet of their life, at every moment of their life, with those narratives. And economic uncertainty and nuclear power is often thought as vital to nuclear power is not thought as vital. They sell uranium. They don't have nuclear power plants, is what I mean by that. But without nuclear power plants, they can't sell their uranium, is what she's talking about. Economic footprint. And they don't make that much money. It's really not that much money. Their farming sector dwarfs their nuclear income. She went on to say her time in Ontario consisted of touring the full fuel cycle for nuclear power in the province. Well, she went on to say, so they weren't interviewing her, they were quoting some kind of exchange, allegedly, right? It's the way it's wrote, we rarely see, so it seems like they wrote this story because they're afraid she's going to read it, and they don't want her to appreciate and understand the enormity of what she's signing on for. Not so much the people in Saskatchewan, but Princess herself. It was fascinating, so you know you're kooky as shit when you call radioactive fallout that destroys the lives, and this is Chernobyl's children, and then you try to sell it as an ice cream container when they're actually 24-story buildings, right? They're 240-foot buildings, half of it is under the ground, and the rest of it is above it. So there's going to be probably 11, 12 stories above ground, not some little tiny, idiotic ice cream container, okay? That's the Hitachi boiling water reactor X300 is going to be at least 12 stories underground and 12 stories above the ground. It's not going to look like that. So why are they still showing that? Very disappointed. Why aren't you talking about what the emissions from the fuel pools, which is what she said she's seen the whole cycle, does to the victims? No, the young people love it. Like me, I'm young, so they love me too. I'm special. I can count to 10 backwards. Young says she toured basically the full fuel cycle for nuclear power, and woo, it smelled wonderful. Said she toured, actually, Young said she had toured, actually, it's a very strange grammar, right? The Nuclear Waste Management Organization of Canada, which had $26 billion 23 years ago, 24 years ago. Never grew a cent of interest. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. The interest are given to people who like some young girl. The big takeaway from her trip, she said, was the jobs. High-paying jobs. The jobs. When I talk to young people in particular, they're deeply concerned about pollution. Really? If they're concerned about pollution, then nuclear is not something they ever want in their country, let alone their province. International Atomic Energy Agency today admitted there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency, United Nations, allowable radiation standards are based on benefit, not safety. There is no benefit from man-made anthropogenic radiation. Your immune system immediately attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells, tries to build a tumor around it. And that their standards is based on natural stuff that you can't exist without, like potassium, magnesium, and iron, and carbon. These are not emitters. These are not dangerous entities. These are stardust. This is something that every species and every human on the planet is already acclimated to through genetic superior selection. Just trying to not scream here. Top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation fallout. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. I'm special. Japanese author, an extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases in Fukushima. Heart problems, death rates might give the creeps to some people. There was an extra 12,695 extra people died in a single month compared to any month of the years before. 865,000 extra cancers in the first year, 13,646 and 38,200 children with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters. So radioactive hormones for the rest of their lives as they're developing. 14.2% of the children have congenital heart disease, need open heart surgery. Of 100,000, that's 14,200. 14,200 children need open heart surgery, neonates and infants, because of, Fukushima. 6 out of 10 Fukushima children with diabetes. No, the young people want nuclear. They love nuclear waste. They want to eat it in a bowl. So it used to be 1 in a million. Now it's 35.8%. Hang on. So pre-Fukushima thyroid tumors was 1 in a million. I might have to adjust the volume. Don't matter, I'll turn it down and I'll go back up.
But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children.
So 1 or 2 in every million children. Now it's 358,000 out of a million. And so your thyroid is 3 by 5 centimeters. The child's is by 2 by 3. And so a 2 by 3 centimeter with a 2 centimeter tumor is the size of the thyroid gland. And there's no way that you can have a tumor that big on a child's thyroid gland without having incredible amount sequestered in your bones, betas, for instance. And so you're talking about permanently at this stage, and you got to assume the rest of the children got the same issues. These are stunning numbers. So as they're developing and producing radioactive stem cells and radioactive hormones forever, and then that's going to be applicable to every species, but much more prominent because we're at the top of the food chain. Top radiation experts, 50 atoms a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organ. You put 200 million, so a BQ is a pulse of energy, explodes in every direction each second, almost at the speed of light. The cesium-137 will pulse that energy 600 feet every second for 300 years. And so 50, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. And it takes an atom to make the BQ, the Becquerel, which is the pulse of energy. So if you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. How hard is it going to be for you to work out there's at least 50 in your diet? And that 50 atoms a kilogram in your diet over a few years, or breathing it and drinking it also, leads to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. Irreversible, that word is very important, which leads to immediate compromise to the immune system, which makes you more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that are normally harmless and innocuous and benign. Child's risk of a cancer from radiation 10 to 1,000, it's 100 to 1,000 times higher than an adult, because the child is developing, right? And so their thyroid is producing nothing but radioactive hormones, and their skeleton is producing nothing but radioactive stem cells, and you need all of that for development, and they're not normal. They're not in the DNA of the human, see? Because anthropogenic man-made radiation, which is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, is not part of the food chain. We're not used to it. Our body treats it as a foreign object and attacks it appropriately with white blood cells every second for the rest of your life, trying to repair the damage from the explosions wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells. Is there anybody out there? Can anybody hear me? I got 13 people on my show tonight. I'm talking about United Nations again, right? So that's who's censoring me. They're not gonna take that. They have protocol. Nothing personal. They gotta censor me. It's just business, Dana. Yeah, and death is your business, isn't it? Imagine how weird you are that you got a job to censor someone like me. And you take it. Imagine what kind of moron you got to be to live that world. I'm special. That's what they tell their friends, right? That's what they tell themselves every time they look into the mirror. I'm special. I'm sure you are, princess. Children with 11 atoms a kilogram start to see heart problems. At 50, it's permanent holes in their hearts. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram. For adults, 50 atoms a kilogram is permanent lesions to your organs, and it's downhill after that. July 18, 2025, 4 days ago, model predicts long-term effect of nuclear waste on underground disposal system. They got to sell this, right? So you're going to get all these studies showing up by, the bootleg and cheerleading lapdogs of the industry. This is how they make a living, being scum. Simulation, right? Why we got 80 years of experience. Why do we need to simulate? Results from an underground lab experiment in Switzerland suggesting modeling could be used to validate the safety of the nuclear disposal sites. And they love doing studies that are fake studies that quantify lies, right? Strange industry. They got some real mental illness in that industry. Like in the future, pro-nuclear will be declared a mental illness. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. Come on, man. Don't do me like that, dog. Oh. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. It'll take a second. Blurp. Okay, so I'm going to show you a bunch of studies, and when you see this lines here, they're going to stand there because they have the alphabets onto them and sometimes numbers with their names, and these are the authors of the study. Impaired wound healing after radiation therapy. So all of these studies I'm going to show you is radiation therapy studies. And so what radiation therapy, I'll explain that. There's an epidemic put away of radiation therapy injuries. As you'll see, radiation-associated cancer risk among injured children treated at different trauma centers. Radiation-associated cancer risk. Let's radiate them. They're a child. Now's the time to get them. Start producing those radioactive stem cells. Several decades after radiation therapy studies, they find that the heart valves are hardened up and they don't work anymore because you had radiation therapy. So when you get radiation therapy, it typically means you got less than 5 years to live. And it ain't going to be very pleasant. Several decades after, and you get multiple tumors from the radiation therapy, by the way. You might even cure a tumor, but you got 8, 10, 12 more everywhere else. Rectal tumors seems to be a really popular one. Several decades after radiation therapy, then the real crime begins. Radiation-induced chronic arterial injuries, heart injuries. Surgical treatment and intestinal radiation therapy injuries. Late radiation-induced rectal injuries after radiation therapy for carcinoma of the uterus. Radiation therapy-induced skin wounds. Microwave-induced radiation therapy brain injuries. Acute radiation-induced injuries, a summary of the symposium on acute radiation therapy-induced injuries. It's like something out of a horror show. Surgical treatment of radiation injuries of the colon and rectum. That's pretty popular studies too. Radiation-induced ocular eye damage in dogs. Well, it didn't kill the dogs, so let's use it on the kids. Oh, can we do that? Hey, we're the nuclear industry. There's no law. There's no law that this is illegal. If it was illegal to kill you with radiation therapy wouldn't exist very long. They'd be dead in the water the next morning. They'll be like, no way, can't use radiation therapy no more. Radiation therapy is a real sickness, eh? I know. Here, that's one for. Introduction to radiation injury, another silent epidemic. And it's only an epidemic to the people that gets it. If you get radiation therapy, you're part of the silent epidemic of radiation injuries. Injuries to the visual pathways. Radiation injury to the heart. Sounds like a hoot. Cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer. Radiation-induced, of course. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Hypoxia, because you kill all the cells in your body. And then hope everything goes normal after. Think of it as getting your hair cut. Don't think of it as falling out because we kill every cell in your body. And that's their big plan. We'll kill every cell in your body. And there's a 2 or 3% chance you're going to be cured. Because that's the number, right? It's 2.2% in Australia and 2.6%, almost 3% in the United States of survival more than 5 years after your therapy, your radiation therapy. Hypoxia-associated radiation therapy. Blood spinal cord. So, no matter what's wrong with you, can we treat it with radiation? Should we try? If that question gets asked, guess where you're headed for? You cute little lab rat, you. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption and central nervous system radiation injuries. Oh, radiation-induced lung injuries. Radiation-induced bowel injuries, all of our favorites. Come on, secretly acknowledge you want to get radiation therapy to ruin your bowels. Laser treatment of severe radiation injuries of the lower gastrointestinal tracts. Oh, it sounds like a party. Radiation-induced kidney injuries, good old radiation kidney injuries. And so there was one study that was shown there was 10,000 women who had their breast removed for breast cancer but never had it. It was just easy money because they got paid a lot of money, the doctors did, to do the surgery. So there was a lot of doctors went to jail for life for doing it to thousands of patients. But there was so much corruption, they couldn't get everybody. Over 10,000 women had their breast cut off and didn't have cancer. It was just easy money to do the surgery. The breast radiation, there's no corruption in doctors at all. The breast radiation injury litigation, central nervous system radiation, from all of this from radiation therapy, right? Injury to the cranial nerves. So they'll use radiation on anything. And this way, and Trump just removed all the restrictions on the industry. Even worse. And so Canada will do the same thing, because Canada's a moron land. Properties protect lungs from radiation-induced injuries. There's nothing can protect you from radiation. Radiation injury to the head and neck. So you're going to get radiation therapy and you have all these issues when you walk away, if you walk away. The assessment of radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiation-induced regional lung injuries. Radiation small bowel injuries. Radiation injuries. Breast injuries is a huge amount of studies like that. Radiation-induced intestinal syndrome. Look at all the people on these studies. They got to pay mortgages. Their children got to go to private schools, and they got to be in all the sports, soccer, music lessons, and all. They got to be buying nice shiny clothes and sneakers. And vitamin C could help you after a major nuclear accident. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. I can play the videos of the testimonies from the parents. If you don't want me to do it, I can trust me. You don't want me to play this stuff. Radiation-induced normal tissue injuries. It just the disease that keeps radiation-induced rectal injuries, man. There's so many studies of that. That'll give you the creeps. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injury. Good luck. You need more radiation. No matter what it is, radiation. And back in the day, with radium, you had radium suppositories. As soon as Marie Curie developed radium concentrates, here's radium suppositories, sorry. They had radioactive makeup, radioactive lipstick, radioactive face cream. Who were they targeting? Little girls, right? Radioactive soap, radioactive, jugs where you would fill it up with water and it becomes radioactive. You're supposed to drink that. All of these ended up stopping because of lawsuits from all the victims' families. But the radioactive water, people's jaws were dropping off, right? It was horrific. The radium era, and then the nuclear power industry, so-called nuclear power industry, which was the breeder for isotopes for weapons. And so the byproduct of that has been designed to poison as many people as possible. The Congress in the United States, for instance, the Parliament in Canada, in Great Britain, for instance, Australia, New Zealand, the Diet in Japan and Taiwan, which is the governments, don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with man-made radiation. It's exempt. There's 3,000 chemicals that they do, however, make it illegal to poison you with, but they don't have the authority. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the non-nuclear regulatory commission really, has the authority to stop them poisoning you. And they're appointed by the president and prime ministers of each of the countries. And if they were to make a decree and make it illegal to poison you with radiation, all hospitals will have to cease immediately murdering your loved ones. It's a guaranteed murder. All nuclear plants would have to shut down right away. Radiation rectal injuries, man. There's so many of those studies. All your glands are destroyed. Your liver is destroyed. Your bile duct is destroyed. Like, you got so many studies of radiation therapy injuries. Then the only real reality of this is not only is there an epidemic, but it's a genocide. It's on purpose. They're killing you and your loved ones and your friends and your families. And if they can't get you to take the radiation, then there's good old chemo. And the minute that you're hooked on that, then it's not working because it's killing you. Well, doctors, they got to do something for my loved one, my child, my wife, my son. Well, there is radio chemotherapy we can give them. Yeah, here in Canada, we allow $900,000 for every victim. I mean, every sick, wonderful person can get $900,000 worth of radiation and chemo. That don't do it. Nothing will do it. All you can do is sign right here. What am I signing? Oh, it's just so you can't sue us if your child dies from radiation. Just a technicality. You can't sue us, actually. You tell me that's not evil. This whole industry is indelibly the face of evil. Language decline after brain radiation therapy. How can you call any of this therapy? How does that even work? Because someone challenges them in court to prove that that's actual therapy. They have no way of proving it. And then the judge or the jury's left with this, you people are monsters. They're so powerful, they murder everybody in the hospitals, and we bring our loved ones there and let them do it. Oh yeah, we'll sign the paper. Hell yeah, dog. Radiotherapy. If it's called radiotherapy, it must be good, Dana. Except when you look at all the studies and all the people that done the studies and added all these people up, you're left with one thing and one thing only. These people are actually monsters on a whole different level than anything else on the planet. Model predicts long-term effects of nuclear waste and underground disposal is no different than these studies here where they claim that it's therapy, and claim that it has benefits, and claim that they have a moral compass, and they don't. And the health effects of radioactive fallout are well known. Like they need to study to move forward. And they might spend $100 million on studies, everything you can imagine, so that they can whip out a study to any dissenting voices. That's all it's about. They got to cover all the bases, and they have an enormous amount of money to do it with. In Canadian dollars, $70 billion for the next nuclear plant in the United Kingdom. I was laughing at that today because it's absurd. 70 billion, not million, but $70 billion. Radiation Fukushima disaster still affecting 32 million people. 2015. Really, I thought nobody was affected. I thought it was like a banana and potato chip walking in the sunshine. You, sir, are a great slave. You're a perfect slave. You can get a job with UN. As with the Chernobyl accident, impacted 10 million people. Japan is expected to see an increased risk of cancer. So Chernobyl, they say, impacted 10 million. Fukushima impacted 32 million. It's away, like there's 36 million people in metropolitan Tokyo alone. And Tokyo's a nuclear wasteland. Just one rainfall was 29 million atoms per square meter underground. And that was cesium-137. That's way beyond background levels. The Chernobyl nuclear accident impacted 10 million people. Chernobyl, or Fukushima rather, contaminated the entire planet and every species. It was a pulse event on top of 80 years of brutal emissions. Experts issue warnings top secret U.S. military base emerges from melting snow. These aren't tombs for eternity. This was a song James had put out about a story about ice, nuclear waste in Iceland that was just left under the snow. And of course, the media got to come out with a story to justify, we thought it was going to snow forever, and we're good people. We wouldn't have done it if we thought there was going to be a chance that it could be exposed. We're good people. No, we're not going to go down and clean it up. Are you kidding me? But we're really good people. Trust us. There's a time bomb in Greenland, and it's ticking faster with each passing day. The consequence is not a mighty explosion. It's the same effects, though, because once you release the emissions into the environment, it's an explosion that covers the planet with radioactive fallout for many millenniums. But contamination from what lurked just below the surface. During the Cold War, the United States constructed a top military installation called Camp Century beneath the northwest Greenland ice sheets. Though decommissioned in 1967, the facility was never fully cleaned up. Decommissioned. Really? You took the used fuel editor, did you? Oh, okay. Nah. At the time, the military assumed the structure would be entombed in ice indefinitely. Says who? You can't just say that without quoting who told you that. You can't quantify that was even said without, right? That's a conjecture, an opinion. But you're stating it as if somebody was quotable, and you never quoted them. But the planet has other plans. No, the nuclear industry has destroyed the planet. That's why you're seeing the ice melt. And these freak storms and these catastrophic die-offs of every species. All of it's post-Fukushima. As temperature rise, I mean, it's been going on since the nuclear industry, inception. We watched the planet change, and it's been documented. Because originally, for the first couple of decades, there was enthusiasm towards the studies. Oh, crap, it killed almost all the salmon eggs. That was pretty cool. And so they were doing all these studies, and it was acceptable. But then they started, people like me can paint you a picture with that stuff, and it's very convincing because it's true. That's the only reason my stuff is convincing, because I'm an idiot. I go through a lot of work to document every facet of everything I'm saying, for the most part, that I can, because you can't do everything. That day, I guess, is coming. As temperatures rise, Camp Century legacy is starting to resurface. Not pretty. It's a published study. They estimated 240,000 liters of sewage and wastewater, 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, and a no amount of radioactive nuclear power, blah, blah, blah. So they're like, a little nuclear somewhere in there, and not sure where. There's some nuclear. No, nuclear is the issue. The rest of the stuff they couldn't care less about. Oh, coolant, radioactive coolant, Dana. Oh, okay. You sure it's not fuel rods? You crazy critters. In those hazardous materials leach into surrounding ecosystems, they contaminate the Arctic waters and food chain. Like worse than Fukushima? No. But catastrophic to the environment? 100 billion%. And eventually and a billion is not close, because the way radiation creates pollution, the radioactive fallout, equating it with billions still doesn't do it justice. You're going to be by mega trillions, quadrillions. And he eventually making their way into the broader ocean currents. That would be bad news for the human health, biodiversity, and global fishery. Oh, that's quite interesting, because radiation levels on the west coast spiked after Fukushima 1 million to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels, and covered the entire planet in 24 days in this depiction, which is a study based on, it spiked, right? The study is, it spiked. This is the French government. The radiation levels on the U.S. West Coast spiked to 1,000 times what they considered normal. There is no such thing as a normal radiation, man-made radiation. It's man-made. But it was actually up to 10 million times pre-Fukushima levels of just cesium-137. And radiation data after Seattle survey going to be held for national security purposes. You paid them, you gave them the authority, the monetary, the equipment, the ability to go out and find the radiation. They're like, no, we're not going to tell you because we're pro-nuclear. Yeah, but you're supposed to be just the arm of the population to inform them of the radioactive. Well, we can't do it because it makes nuclear look bad, Dana. Yeah, but that's why you were created, was to find radioactive fallout to protect, so we can protect ourselves. Yeah, we're not doing that because the nuclear industry is really powerful. We're going to be on their side. Radioactive xenon-133 in Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels after Fukushima. It persisted for weeks. But let's worry about what might happen in the future instead of what's happening. Both are equally horrifying, mind you. And so, what James done was he produced a video to give you insight. I'm going to play that. And it gives you insight into, because reading the story doesn't tell you nothing. What is this camp century? What does that mean? And James calls it Project Milkworms. I love it. But it actually gives you insight into that story that we're talking about. Hopefully, I can get it running here. Which is Project Milked Worms. So
1959 they dug a trench. Said green means go and flip the switch. Buried waste beneath the snow with clearance codes they hoped you'd never know. Dropped a reactor under ice. Said don't worry, it's clean and nice. Left the drums beneath the flow. No oversight, just future undertow. They said the ice would hold. They said the seals were cold. They said the sun was far away. But now the glacier's got some things to say. They said the waste was clean. They sold a half-life dream. They knew the melt would come too late and wrote it off as not their fate. Project ice worm sealed and shut. No retrieval, no post-cut. High flux waste and fission heat. Entombed beneath the Arctic sheet. They hid what they could not defend. No cleanup clause, no back end. You can't go green with fuel rods bare. And isotope trails in the polar air.
probably way worse than what James is showing you. But actually, you start realizing, holy shit, how do you go in and dig into that? Because you open up these air pockets and you have this plume coming out. When it melts through, you have these plumes coming out of there. That whole area becomes a nuclear, very dangerous, hot area of radioactive emissions and sources. And it's spread over a huge area. And like when you dig into this, you're going to open up those plumes. And I remember when he posted, I was watching the video and I was like, you can't. When I talk about it, I don't think about all that, right? I don't envision that kind of stuff. Just how do you get into that environment?
Now camps and trees waking off the shelf. No reactor ever stayed contained. No future came to take the blame. The climate cracked what war designed and left the core for us to find.
Right? And how do you deal with nuclear waste in that environment is beyond me. Like I strongly suggest you send all the nuclear scientists into the tunnel, and when the one in front of the scientist drops dead, the next scientist picks up the Geiger counter and takes his dead time and slowly inches his way forward. When he dies, the next nuclear scientist, right? And then you can have the nuclear students dragging the dead scientists out of the tunnels. And when they die, the next nuclear student can... And that way they'll be really good stewards of our planet, the ones that survive. I'm not trying to be mean or nothing. I'm just saying That's what they're for, right? We need to sacrifice as many nuclear scientists. We have a lot of nuclear scientists, so if we sacrifice 8 or 10 million, that shouldn't hurt the population too bad. And they're only nuclear scientists, so it doesn't really matter. Extreme weather events have always occurred, but scientific consensus is that the human-driven pollution is supercharging them. Yeah. Yeah, so you covered the whole planet in radioactive fallout. There's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. It's like an invisible snowstorm, and every snowflake is pulsing energy for millions of years at the speed of light. What do you think is going to happen after 80 years? And then you kill off all the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. That's why I'm so popular, see? That's why I got 12 people. My goodness, that's amazing. How did I get that many people on my show? It's beyond me. Is Fukushima nuclear fallout beyond the remaining 13,000, because 14,000 died since 2016 post-Fukushima, all these die-offs, all these strange events, all these brutal climate change, these weather phenomena, these, like, and like the forest fires all over the country. Like Canada's got 3 times more forest fires than they've ever had before in their history, and everybody else can tell you the same story, by the way. And then what's going on is these flash floods. That's a real popular thing post-Fukushima, right? And studies from Chernobyl showed that the radioactive fallout, which was nothing compared to Fukushima, Fukushima was probably 3,600 times worse. Because you had 36 massive reactor cores, each 100 Chernobyls of uranium and plutonium, released directly into the environment. And then the meltdown produces more every day because it's atomizing and aerosoling, ionizing and radiating everything at multiple 1,000-degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And these plumes are very important contributors to the. You don't need oxygen for this stuff to burn on top of that. So it can burn underwater, it can burn anywhere else. And so what you done was you had all this radioactive fallout on the planet. This is just 23 days, 24 days of radioactive fallout of over 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, minimum, and cesium-137 pulsing energy 600 feet every second. So it annihilates the bacteria, the fungus, and the biota in the forests and the meadows. And so what happens now is the plants and the trees and the ecosystem is dependent upon fungus and bacteria in the soil. And that's how you have all this biota, all these microscopic animals that can break down the foliage and the litter in the forests and the meadows and that. And because you wipe all of that out, you still got plants. So but now they're getting oxygen from the air because it's not soaking into the ground anymore. The reason it's soaked into the ground because you had all this biota, which would break down the foliage and the litter. So now all of that, after many years, is tinder dry. But it didn't break down, it didn't disappear, it didn't become nutrients back into the ecosystem. And so now when you get lightning strikes, you have all this foliage and litter that's tinder dry. It's unbelievably dry, and it catches fire, and then the heat causes it to float up and move a few hundred feet or 1,000 feet. And because there's this huge fireball now landing that normally would never exist pre-Fukushima, and the earth is not soaking up the water because you don't have that ecosystem. You kill that off right away. Not right away, but post-Fukushima, because Fukushima was a pulse event. You already had 70 years of emissions worldwide from 1,000 fuel pools doing this all day, every day. A continuous plume, but you can't perceive it. And like my Geiger counter is not going to pick up the 220 million 1 liter deposit of iodine-129. That's going to be here where I'm to right now for the next 150 million years. It's not going to pick up all the other isotopes. It's very ineffective, and it's considered a good Geiger counter. It's an inspector, and they're not cheap. And so you have these flash floods because when you have rain, instead of the rain soaking up into the biota, right, which enhances the ecosystem, would break down this incredible amount of foliage and litter in your ecosystems. And you go to now, mostly, if not all of the ants' nests you'll find are empty. And they're tinder dry. In the ground, you go into the forest, you dig into the ground, it's tinder dry, it's dust. And so rain doesn't soak up into that stuff. It just washes off it. And so the ocean is still producing tens of thousands of miles of rain clouds every day. It comes into the coastline. When it butts up against the mountain, it drops a huge amount of its payload, and that washes typically now right back down to the ocean. Instead of getting a lot of it getting soaked up in the meadows and estuaries and forests. Now, but also because the forest, the landmass is producing so much heat, and the ocean is producing so much heat, that when you have typhoons or cyclones or hurricanes, you're boosting them by 20 to 30% or something. And we're having storms now where we don't have infrastructure that can sustain those impacts of high winds, right? You know, a few years back, there was a storm in China that blew down 500 million trees in just one area. The winds came ashore at 250 plus miles per hour, and then were gusting to who knows what. And we've never seen that pre-Fukushima. These are all post-Fukushima events we're seeing. And it's happened constantly. We've seen it in the Atlantic with hurricanes, for goodness sakes, and the Pacific, of course, where you get supercell after supercell storms coming ashore at 150 to 160 miles per hour, and you don't have building codes for those types of winds because we've never had them before. Pre-Fukushima. These are post-Fukushima phenomenons. And because the Earth is not soaking up water, it's now soaking up heat. And that's just contributing right to that cycle. What's being done to stop this Arctic threat from spreading? Camp Century remains under Denmark's jurisdiction. Scientists are monitoring the area, but cleanup efforts face steep logistical and political hurdles. Japan ministry says rice harvests survey record to surge by a record on high prices. They got rid of just Fukushima Prefecture produces over 1 billion pounds of rice each year, and most of the prefectures are close to those numbers per year. And these are severe nuclear wastelands. These are they can lie all they want, but they can't deny the actual reality, right? We have the documentations to back up these assertions, and I don't have an opinion. I only have documentation. So all of these shows are documentation. Japan's agricultural ministry says, because that's how you run an educational program with documentation, right? Japan's agricultural ministry said this year, I couldn't do a radio show because the industry would be all over me. Oh, he's lying about this and he's lying about that. And so live, being able to bring you all this documentation, by the way, was no easy feat. Just it's been a struggle for a very long time to master the equipment. They had to buy the same equipment that the media uses so it can handle anything you throw at it, because that's what you needed to tell the story, right? And so I ended up having to get a TriCaster just to even come close to being able. I needed equipment that can keep up with me, right? So I can drag it, find it, bring it in, and tell it, and provide it, and show it as documentation to alleviate any descending propaganda voices. Because the industry was all over me for many years. They had a great time. They're still having an amazing time. I mean, they do nothing but destroy me, and but they don't come out and say, well, Dana, you made a mistake here, and that's a mistake, and Dana, you're wrong about this, and you're wrong about that. They can't go there. I'm not terrified of making a Freudian slip, for goodness sakes, and I have been for a very long time. So I'm very, even though, how do you avoid that, say? It does happen rarely, but it does happen. But it's easy to identify, I notice, when I do catch that it has happened. But the industry will chop that out and string them together and come out. Dana's an idiot, watch this. Will likely increase by more than 500,000 tons from last year's prices remain high, which is another 1.1 billion pounds of food from a nuclear wasteland. They go out and make everybody, people sick and for the rest of their life and hurt their loved ones and friends and families and pets. The estimate says about 6 million hectares will be dedicated to growing table rice this year from 100,000 hectares from 2024. It's up 100,000, rather. The harvest is likely to increase as much as 560,000 tons to 7.35 million tons. 7.53 million tons, times, which is metric, 2,200 pounds a ton, 16 billion pounds. How much rice can 16 billion pounds of radioactive rice, how many people could that harm? Just let me show you what I mean by that, because otherwise I'm a liar. I know, I get it. I get it. The only problem is there's not enough others. Hang on. Oh, am I gonna looky. Yeah. La 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 la. What have I got down here? U.S. Navy sailor, our digital watches stopped working when off the coastline of Fukushima. We were laughing at first, and then everybody had diarrhea. They were defecating in the hallways because all the bathrooms were plugged up. Rice grown nearby Fukushima plant cleared for sale. The farmer said, I wouldn't eat it. We feel guilty growing it and selling it. I always threaten to play the video, and I just seen it a few minutes back. Am I clever enough to be able to go find it? That's the question that we're about to find out. Oh, apparently not. Do I give one more try? Or did I blow my only chance? Well, it's almost the end of the show, so I might as well find it. Let me do that one more time here. I think it's when I put the race in, that's when that video showed up. Oh, I'm an idiot. Oh, yeah, wow. In your face. Race baiters. How do we keep going? This is this guy right here. Do you understand the meaning of D in the word decontamination? We're just tilling the radiation deeper and spreading the radiation thinly. We're not removing the radiation, no matter what the radiation levels has not gone down. We measured the radioactivity in the air. It has not gone down at all. We have not removed the contamination.
あと一つ言っておくことがあるんですけれども、福島県は農作物は出荷の前に全部検査しないと出荷できません。
All farms must be checked for cesium levels. What about the uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, the thousands?
出荷できません。今は100ベクレル以下っていうことになってますけれども、農家が生産している私は分かりますよ、これが何ベクレルあるって。放射の要は100ベクレル以下だったら出荷できるわけですから、私は食べませんよ。
We can ship 100 atoms a kilogram, but I wouldn't eat it.
買って食べる人は放射能メイド持って買って食ってるってどうなの？俺らは分かってんだよ。罪の意識なんの作ってな。
We feel guilty about growing it and selling it. You should. It's murder.
自分は食わねえけど、人の
We won't eat it ourselves, but we sell it. Because they don't understand. See?
どう思いますか？ちょっと答えてください。
They probably arrested him for that. You're not allowed to question the scumbag pro-nuclear community. Dana? Rice planted 10 miles from Fukushima. You can't stay in the town overnight. It's intended for sale. Help wanted ad seeks employees that can carry out a conversation. That sounds like a job for a nuclear scientist, Dana. Plutonium was detected all over the village 25 miles. Something terrible, dreadful is happening. Because they don't understand. They didn't have anybody to warn them. And they were, I guarantee you, they weren't welcomed. No crops for 300 years. Japan rice is allegedly causing diarrhea. Officials told not to send any more donated rice. That's genocide, eh? Officials made it mandatory to use Fukushima rice in school lunches. It's like Russian roulette. I mean, holy smokes, right? Just the contempt. And they're growing 16 billion pounds of this each year and shipping it worldwide. And I'm not going to go through the rest of it because but you can read it in your own time if you feel like it. Like, this is just sickening, disgusting. And it's totally legal. The Congress and parliaments and the Diet in Japan, which is like the Congress in the United States or the Parliament in Canada, doesn't have the authority to make it illegal to murder you with radiation. They can ship that food to your country, and they can make up all the numbers they want, right? Europe raised the level to 1,100 atoms per kilogram after Fukushima, and the United States to 1,000 atoms per kilogram is safe. I think it was 100 times more than what it was pre-Fukushima. And in Japan raised it to 500 atoms per kilogram, and they would say, well, America is at 1,000 atoms per kilogram. Europe's at 1,100, 1,200 atoms per kilogram. We're only 500, so we're much safer, our food, than theirs is. Right? That was the idea of, and they done it. And there was lots of headlines documenting them doing and talking that way. This is real. This is not a game. All the whales are emaciated because it's not like a banana. It's not like a potato chip. It's not like walking in the sunshine. It's not like climbing a mountain. It's not like sleeping next to somebody or flying on a plane. This is a despicable lie to tell you all of that, and that's what they scream at you everywhere you go. Every classroom, every theater, every TV set, that propaganda, the Simpsons, the Hulk, the Spider-Man, these are all manipulated by the industry to lull you over generations, particularly growing up, to just completely pretend that I'm crazy for caring and you're sane for not caring. It's a brilliant technique. It's so brilliant that we're going to lose the planet. All the whales are emaciated. And nobody cares. They're like, Dana, please, I'm so sick of hearing about all the whales being emaciated and dying. Wish they would all die and just go away and be done with it. I don't need stupid whales. I don't care about whales. And that's the problem, right? All the whales are emaciated, and we're talking about every species, not just the gray whales. And they're certainly, all the migratory whales are emaciated. They'll blow your mind. What does? That doesn't scream, it's time to fight back. Then you'll never have this opportunity again. I'm pushing James too hard. I was hoping he had another song ready to go. I gotta leave the boy alone. Lucky for me, I have a backup song ready to go. Bump, bump, bump. It's called pink hydrogen. You'll find it at the same link I put there at James Luce's site on YouTube. There's so many other songs. One more kick at the pole. Is Fukushima nuclear fallout behind the remaining 13,000 migratory grey whales being severely emaciated? They were emaciated last year. They're emaciated. They had 80 babies. None survived the trip last year. They were all emaciated when they got south to the nursing ground. They had 80 babies allegedly. And when they left there, they left dead, emaciated grey whales all over the nursery. Never done that before. And this has been going on for quite a few years, but we're at the end of it now. In a couple of years, there might be 200 grey whales left in, say, 2 years, 3 years. They're all emaciated. You can't just have like half is emaciated, the other half is healthy. It doesn't work that way. These are whales. They all eat the same food. So they're all emaciated or not, or none of them are emaciated per se, right? But it's also, they all have the bioaccumulation of radiation in their body is extraordinary, I would imagine. And so they got leukemia, basically. All right, we made it to the show. It's so hard just to get everything ready, get in, sit down, and then start the show. When you start the show, it takes quite a while for your voice to stop dying on you and everything else. And then you're half an hour into the show, you finally get your groove on, and you're trying to tell the story of today, because all this has to go into the black hole, because tomorrow's coming right at us, right? And you don't want to make any mistakes, because the industry will chop, string them together. And look at this guy's an idiot. Anything, and they'll do it for free just to to get street creds in the industry. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. See everybody on the next show. Take care now.
They say it's clean, just in bright light, but beneath the gloss, there's nothing right. They say it's safe, they say it's pure, nuclear reborn, that's the cure. Wrapped up tight in pastel tones, hide the flaws, mask the bones. Trojan horse wrapped in gloss. Look real close, there's danger there. They say it's safe, they say it's pure. Painted pink, they laugh and cheer. Trust us, nothing to fear. Fuel rods turn, the cycle spins. While they cash out, everyone grins. Sure, it's all safe here, but the cost they won't make clear. They say it's fake, they say it's pure. Painted pink, they laugh and cheer. Trust us, nothing to fear. Fuel rods turn, the cycle spins. While they cash out, everyone grins. Sure, it's all safe here, but the cost they won't make clear. So call it pink and mask the stain. Paint over waste, dismiss the pain. Keep the cycle, keep the game. Disguise the threat, shift the blame. Trojan tricks and faces bright. Tell us lies wrapped up in light. Only keep the game, shift the blame. It's painted pink, it's all a show. Pink hydrogen wrapped up need. Nuclear's tricked, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. A Trojan gift, dressed in a lie. A polished mask for what's so right. The future's here, they say it's bright, but hidden deep it's not so light. They say it's bright, they say it's bright. Say it's bright. Pink hydrogen wrapped up need. Nuclear's tricked, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. They sell us dreams, they paint it bold, but what's hidden there is cold. A polished face, a crafted guise. Pink hydrogen, their perfect lie. Their perfect lie. What's this, what's left inside? A future built on what they hide. And mask the stain. Paint over waste, dismiss the pain. Keep the cycle, keep the game. Disguise the threat, shift the blame. Tricks and faces bright. Tell us lies wrapped up in light. The cycle, keep the game. Pink hydrogen wrapped up need. Nuclear's trick, disguised as clean. Painted bright for all to see. A scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. Pink hydrogen wrapped up need. dreams, they paint it bold, but what's hidden there is cold. A polished face, a crafted guise, pink hydrogen, their perfect lie. Their perfect lie. The massless. What's left inside a future built on what they hide. Hydrogen wrapped up neat, nuclear's trick disguised as clean, painted bright for all to see, a scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat, nuclear's trick disguised as clean, painted bright for all to see, a scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. Pink hydrogen wrapped up neat, nuclear's trick disguised as clean, painted bright for all to see, a scheme that leaves us lost as a ball in tall weeds. A Trojan gift dressed in a lie, a polished mask for what's awry.